Science is built on curiosity, but sometimes that curiosity has taken researchers down some deeply unsettling paths. While many experiments have led to groundbreaking discoveries, others have left behind ethically murky legacies or revealed truths about human nature that we're still grappling with today. From government-backed deceptions to cruel psychological conditioning, these 15 experiments blur the lines between science and moral boundaries, forcing us to rethink what we thought we knew about reality. Let's kick off this chilling list with Number 15. The Tuskegee Syphilis Study. Just search it on Google, and your heart will melt. In 1932, the U.S. Public Health Service launched what participants thought was a free medical treatment program for black men in rural Alabama. But it was an experiment in untreated syphilis, disguised under the vague term bad blood. The 600 men in the study, 399 of whom had syphilis, were never told they had the disease, nor were they given treatment, even after penicillin became the standard cure in 1945. The study continued for 40 years, with doctors lying to participants while observing the length effects of the disease. Many men suffered severe health issues, blindness, and even death. The deception was exposed in 1972, leading to public outrage and congressional hearings. A formal apology was issued by President Clinton in 1997, but for decades, the Tuskegee study stood as a chilling reminder of medical racism and the dangers of unethical human experimentation. Number 14. The Stateville Penitentiary Malaria Study. During World War II, malaria was a bigger threat than enemy fire for American troops stationed in the South Pacific. In a desperate race to find a cure, the U.S. government turned to an unlikely group of test subjects, prisoners. Between 1944 and 1946, over 400 inmates at Illinois' Stateville Penitentiary were deliberately infected with malaria and given experimental treatments to test their effectiveness. Unlike other unethical human trials, this study was fully voluntary. Prisoners participated in exchange for reduced sentences and praise for their patriotism. At the time, the public largely supported the research, prioritizing the war effort over ethical concerns. Despite its questionable ways, the study contributed to the development of safer anti-malarial drugs. Yet, it also sparked lasting debates about informed consent and whether desperation makes true voluntariness impossible. Looking back, the study sits in a gray area between scientific necessity and ethical compromise, raising the question, how far should we go in the name of progress? Number 13. SETI. For over 50 years, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, or SETI, has been scanning the skies for radio signals from alien civilizations. But while we listen, we're also sending out our own signals, essentially broadcasting our location to the universe. Some scientists worry that if hostile extraterrestrials exist, we're making it far too easy for them to find us. Realistically, the vast distances between stars make an invasion scenario unlikely. Even advanced alien ships would take thousands of years to reach us. However, if intelligent life has been evolving for billions of years, why haven't they already colonized their stellar neighborhood? The eerie silence of the universe is either reassuring or terrifying. While the lack of evidence for alien visitation might comfort us, it's not proof that we're alone. The real question remains, are we making a mistake by calling out into the void without knowing who or what might answer? Number 12. The Kola Super Deep Borehole. In 1970, Soviet scientists embarked on a Cold War-era project with a simple yet profound goal: to drill as deep into the Earth as possible. Well, let's say they want to kill the curiosity. By 1989, they had reached a staggering 40,230 feet, making the Kola Super Deep Borehole the deepest man-made hole on Earth. Although some feared they might accidentally break into hell, what they actually discovered was almost as bizarre: a massive amount of hydrogen, which made the mud boil like a cauldron. The project also unearthed rocks over 2.5 billion years old, revealing insights into Earth's ancient past. The Kola project ultimately stalled, not because of demons or disasters, but due to technical limitations and intense underground heat. While we've barely scratched the surface of Earth's depths, the experiment proved how little we truly know about what lies beneath our feet. Who knows, maybe we find an Earth dragon if we ever dig deeper. Number 11. The scientist who let an insect live inside her. Most people would go to great lengths to avoid a parasitic infestation, but one brave researcher in Madagascar willingly let a sand flea burrow into her foot, all in the name of science. The sand flea, or as scientists like to call it, the great Tunga penetrans, is a nasty little parasite that digs into human skin, feeds, swells, and lays eggs before eventually dying inside its host. Until recently, scientists weren't sure how these fleas made it. To find out, this guy let one live inside her for 2 months, observing its behavior up close. Her uncomfortable experiment paid off. She discovered that sand fleas likely mate while the females are already embedded in their hosts. While her research solved a biological mystery, it also serves as a grim reminder of how horrifying nature can be. Few would be willing to endure what she did, but her sacrifice gave us an unsettling insight into the secret sex lives of parasites. Will you do that in the name of science? Number 10. The Large Hadron Collider. Now this thing is gonna wipe out the world. Just mark our words. When the Large Hadron Collider was built near Geneva, Switzerland, some people like us feared it could delete the Earth. The idea? Well, it was pretty wild. That colliding high-energy protons could create mini black holes, ones that might grow uncontrollably and consume the planet just like you eat noodles. In 2012, the LHC made history by confirming the existence of the Higgs boson, a fundamental particle in physics. But did it also risk our existence? The answer, thankfully, is no. Not now. Any black holes created would be microscopic and evaporate instantly, posing no threat to Earth. In reality, more powerful collisions occur naturally when cosmic rays hit Earth's atmosphere, and we're still here. But the fear surrounding the LHC shows how little we trust our own scientific experiments. As particle physics continues to push boundaries, it's fair to wonder, what if we one day build a machine that truly goes too far? Well, let us know. Now, let's talk about Number 9. The Little Albert Experiment. In 1920, psychologist John Watson wanted to prove that human emotions could be conditioned like any other behavior. His test subject? Well, a 9-month-old baby known as Little Albert. Initially, the child was unafraid of animals, but Watson and his team soon changed that. Each time Albert was introduced to a white rat, researchers banged a loud metal bar, terrifying him. Eventually, Albert associated all small furry animals with fear, reacting with distress even when no noise occurred. The experiment proved fear could be conditioned, but Watson never deconditioned Albert, leaving him traumatized for life. Decades later, researchers identified him as Douglas Merritt, a child who suffered from severe neurological impairments and died at age 6. This revelation cast an even darker shadow over an experiment that had already been widely criticized for its ethical failings. We mean, who stupid on earth does some freak brain experiment on a 9-month-old baby? This dude was living in the Stone Age. Come on, man. Number 8. Trinity Test. The Birth of the Atomic Age. At 5:29 a.m. on July 16, 1945, the world changed forever. In the New Mexico desert, a blinding flash tore through the sky as the first nuclear bomb was detonated. Known as the Trinity test, this was the culmination of 3 years of relentless work by scientists in the Manhattan Project, racing to develop a weapon they feared the Nazis might create first. There were initial fears that the detonation could ignite Earth's atmosphere, ending all life. While calculations showed this was nearly impossible, the test still carried unknown risks. The explosion released 18 kilotons of energy, sending a mushroom cloud over 7 miles into the air. The sheer power stunned even the scientists who built it. J. Robert Oppenheimer later recalled thinking of the words, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." Less than a month later, Hiroshima and Nagasaki were bombed, ushering in the nuclear age and a new era of existential fear. Now, it's time for the final one. Number 7. The human vivisections of Herophilus. In ancient Alexandria, physician Herophilus of Chalcedon revolutionized medicine, but at a gruesome cost. Between 300 and 260 BCE, during the reigns of Ptolemy the Firm and Ptolemy II, he performed some of the first recorded human dissections, and, more disturbingly, vivisections on live prisoners. Sources claim Herophilus dissected more than 600 living people, cutting them open to study the brain, nervous system, circulatory system, and organs. All without anesthesia, as the pain itself was considered part of the learning process. At a time when dissection was taboo, and even Egyptian mummification kept bodies largely intact, his work was both revolutionary and horrifying. Though his findings shaped modern anatomy, history has struggled with his ethical legacy. His work was lost after the burning of the Library of Alexandria, leaving only second-hand accounts. Was he a pioneer of medicine or a butcher in the name of science? Number 6. CIA mind control experiments. The Cold War was a time of paranoia, and the CIA took that paranoia to the extreme. Under Project MKULTRA, the agency conducted covert mind control experiments in an attempt to create brainwashed assassins and interrogation-proof spies. Between 1953 and the 70s, unsuspecting U.S. and Canadian citizens, including soldiers, prisoners, and even hospital patients, were dosed with LSD, hypnotized, and subjected to extreme psychological manipulation. The goal? To see if the human mind could be controlled, erased, or reprogrammed. Universities, hospitals, and research centers were unknowingly involved, with 7,000 soldiers subjected to testing without consent. Some victims suffered lasting psychological damage, and at least one death was officially linked to the experiments, though many suspect there were more. In 1973, the CIA destroyed most of the MKULTRA records, ensuring we may never know the full extent of the horrors. But one thing is clear. At one point, the U.S. government seriously considered turning mind control into a weapon. Number 5. The Monster Study. In 1939, speech pathologist Wendell Johnson wanted to test a radical theory. Could stuttering be created through psychological conditioning? To find out, he conducted an experiment on 22 orphaned children under the guise of speech therapy. Children were divided into 4 groups. Some were given positive reinforcement, while others were repeatedly criticized and told they were developing a stutter. The results were devastating. Children who had no prior speech problems became anxious, withdrawn, and self-conscious about their speech. Many never fully recovered from the psychological damage. The study was never published due to its deeply unethical nature, but its existence surfaced in 2001, earning it the nickname the Monster Study. While it helped debunk myths about stuttering, it came at the cost of permanently scarring children, a grim reminder of how psychological experiments can cross dangerous lines. Number 4. Unit 731. During World War II, Japan's Unit 731 turned biological warfare into a horror show. Officially known as the Epidemic Prevention and Water Supply Unit, this secret military facility in Japanese-occupied Manchuria was a human experimentation lab disguised as medical research. Prisoners, mostly Chinese civilians and POWs, but also Russians and Americans, were deliberately infected with diseases like bubonic plague, cholera, anthrax, and syphilis to test their effects. Others were subjected to live dissections, vivisections, without anesthesia, forced frostbite experiments, and chemical weapon exposure. Some reports claim Japanese aircraft dropped plague-infected fleas over Chinese villages as part of field tests. By the war's end, 100,000 to 250,000 people had died from these horrific experiments. Shockingly, after World War II, the U.S. granted Unit 731's leaders immunity in exchange for their research data. For decades, Japan denied the unit's existence, making it one of history's darkest and most buried war crimes. Number 3. The Aversion Project. Under South Africa's apartheid regime, homosexuality was treated as a disease, one that needed to be cured by any means necessary. Between 1969 and 1987, psychiatrists and military doctors in the South African Defense Force conducted horrific aversion therapy experiments on gay men, lesbians, and suspected deviants. Victims were subjected to electroconvulsive therapy while being shown images of same-sex attraction, followed by opposite-sex imagery as correction. When that failed, as it inevitably did, hormone treatments, chemical castration, and even forced gender reassignment surgeries were used. Many underwent surgery without consent, and some were left with incomplete procedures. The exact number of victims remains unknown, but estimates suggest at least 900 people were forced to undergo gender reassignment. The Aversion Project is now recognized as one of the darkest chapters of medical history, exposing the horrific consequences of weaponizing science against identity. Number 2. Milgram's shock experiment. In the early 1960s, psychologist Stanley Milgram wanted to understand why people follow orders, even when those orders cause harm. Inspired by Nazi war crimes, he set up an experiment that would become one of the most controversial in psychology's history. Now, in this experiment, participants were told they were helping with a study on learning. They played the role of teachers, reading word lists to a learner, who was actually an actor. Every time the learner made a mistake, the teacher was instructed to deliver an electric shock, increasing the voltage each time. What they didn't know was that the shocks weren't real, but their reactions were. 2/3 of participants obeyed orders to the very end, pressing buttons they believed would deliver potentially lethal jolts. Milgram's study revealed a chilling truth. People will blindly follow authority figures, even when it contradicts their morals. Replicated in modern times, the results haven't changed much, raising disturbing questions about human nature. Number 1. The Nazi medical experiments. During World War II, Nazi doctors weaponized medicine, conducting grotesque experiments on prisoners in concentration camps. Let's say it was pretty normal for them. Their research ranged from hypothermia tests, where victims were submerged in ice water to see how long they could survive, to high-altitude decompression experiments, where subjects were exposed to rapid atmospheric changes, often followed by live brain dissections. Some prisoners were forced to drink seawater to test survival at sea, while others had wounds intentionally infected to test new drugs. Even more disturbing were the genetic experiments, particularly those performed by Dr. Josef Mengele on twins and people with dwarfism. The Nuremberg trials exposed the horrors of these studies, leading to the Nuremberg Code, a set of guidelines for human experimentation. Despite their brutality, some medical knowledge gained was later used in modern medicine. If you have enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.